When I met my husband 10 years ago, it was love at first sight. We had a lot in common, both atheists, both come from religious families, and both didn't want to have children. We got married 3 years ago. I fell pregnant and had an A 2 years ago, and it was the most traumatizing experience. Partly because of me discovering it by chance and was in the final week before I wasn't able to have a termination, but mostly because of the guilt of doing something wrong, and it has to do with the way I was raised. Anyway, we got through that period and we came out stronger and more in love. We kept the termination a secret for obvious reasons. We told my husband's aunt, mother-in-law's youngest half-sister, because she was out of town the day I was having the A, and she's a nurse and always been like a big sister to us. She's 45. I needed someone to go with me. Mother-in-law never liked me because of the fact that I don't want children. She never understood why a woman would choose the meaningless life I lead. She never either believed that her son is on the same page as me, and she deeply believes he's being taken in by me and is just doing what I say. If left to his own devices, he would have many babies. This belief made her start insinuating that I'm maybe infertile, damaged or broken, to use her words. Whether she believed it or not, I don't know, but she started spreading this rumor, and almost everyone believed her. It made me sad, but what could we do but deny the rumors? We decided it didn't matter. We knew what we wanted, and that was enough. I'm 37 now, and mother-in-law is panicking that I'm getting too old and her chances of becoming a grandmother are slimmer. Husband is an only child. She set my husband up on a date. She asked him to come around, and she had a beautiful 20-something waiting for him. When she introduced them to each other, she left them alone in her kitchen and just went out. My husband told me everything when he came home, and I was so angry I wanted to call her to tell her to leave me alone and to stop trying to ruin my happiness, but my husband forbade it. He loves his mom and wouldn't want anyone to hurt or disrespect her. On his 40th birthday last Friday, hell broke loose. She was in the dining room crying and complaining to her half-sister and two of my husband's best friends about how he, my husband, is being hoodwinked. I'm not a woman. I'm broken and can't have children, but I deceived him by saying I don't want children. She also talked about that girl she introduced him to and how she would make a better wife and give him beautiful babies. I lost it. I started crying and yelling, and I told her about the A. She started screaming that I was cruel for telling such a lie, so I asked Aunt to deliver her the truth. Mother-in-law was shocked and so angry she hit me hard on my face several times. She broke my lip with her rings. She left crying hysterically. My husband was so angry with me for upsetting mother-in-law because I knew she was very religious and A is not allowed in her world. She's refusing to talk to my husband, and I am so hurt, yet feel so much guilt about hurting her with the truth. But I just felt like I couldn't continue being the villain in the eyes of her and anyone who believes her lies. Husband is saying now that I crossed the line, and he mentioned separation. I can't make him choose me. I don't know if I should fight for him or just let him go. I feel terrible. If he is not standing up for you for that insane woman hitting you, he's just not worth fighting for. He's married to his mother. He's perfectly fine letting her disrespect you, your marriage, and the choices you made together. He's decided his overbearing mother is more important than you are. Maybe you should consider letting him walk away, unless you want to continue playing second base till the old bat parts from this world. If he wants separation, let him have it. You, allegedly, crossed the line by defending yourself. But when his mother has been crying and wailing and blaming you for years and finally physically assaulted you, that doesn't count as aggression in his eyes? If anything, you should be the one leaving the spouse who cannot and will not have your back. My sister-in-law's daughter, who I'll call Jane, from a previous marriage, has behavioral problems right now. There's no way to put it nicely. She cries anytime she doesn't get her way, cries for hours, throws massive tantrums, is generally moody, demanding, and emotional. That's not her fault, I know that. She's a child, and I'm sure her parents' divorce contributes a lot to this. The other day, my husband, his brother, his wife, and some other friends were gathered to a big dinner. All the kids were playing together, and something happened to Jane, and she started with her tantrum. She literally cried non-stop for 2 hours straight. No exaggeration. She cried and screamed and flailed and yelled at her mom and dad, and kept crying for a full 2 hours. And I could even tell she was exhausted from keeping it up. Her mom, my sister-in-law, kept asking her, "What's wrong, honey? Did you try it this way? What about this? How about this?" For those 2 hours straight with no change in behavior. At this point, all the guests are politely ignoring it, the piercing wailing and shrieking, and trying to carry on our conversations, or sometimes trying to talk to Jane, to get her to laugh or focus her attention elsewhere, give her different toys or her iPad, or change the TV channel. And we also tried to get the other kids to try to distract her. Nothing worked. Obviously, we're all adults here. We understand that these things happen, and we also know how Jane is. We're tired of hearing it go on, of course, but we haven't expressed any of that. Later, Jane's stepdad, who is my husband's brother, says to us, when she gets like that, sometimes even I have trouble being patient, so I'm sorry for that. And we're all saying, it's okay, we get it. And I ask, have you ever thought of getting her help? He says, it does seem a little excessive, right? And I said, it might just be normal kid behavior, but it might not be also. So maybe it might help to ask someone. And that's when my sister-in-law comes to the table and says, I guess we're all planning on institutionalizing Jane. I'm not sure how much she heard, if it was just the last part of the whole conversation. But either way, I know it was wrong of me to talk about them at all. I was just responding to her husband, but it was probably out of bounds for me to suggest professional help. So I apologized and said I wasn't implying anything terrible, and she said fine, whatever. The next day around 10 a.m., I get a vicious text from her, a wall of text, basically saying, how dare you say something like that? You don't know me. You don't know Jane. How would you feel if someone said that about you? How dare you, etc., etc. Again, I apologized. Then she throws in, I hope your kids end up in a loony bin. That's what karma's all about. I respond that I don't think that comment is necessary, and she says, it's not necessary, but it's definitely what you deserve. End of discussion. I'm pretty frustrated with this whole situation. Yeah, it was wrong of me to talk about her kid, but what's with her hexing my future child? I understand she's pissed off and offended, but we're still family. It's not like we'll never see each other again. Why say such biting words? I talked to my husband about it and he said to just leave her alone and maybe she'll calm down and realize she was being too much. And I agree. But what if she never does? Then what do we do? We have family gatherings pretty often. How do I act around her? I'm kind of done apologizing for my side, honestly. Advice. I actually don't think it was wrong of you to have this conversation with her stepdad, as long as it was actually said as politely as you wrote it here. Jane is behaving abnormally. She just is. 2-hour-long, unending tantrums are not a regular occurrence in 5-year-olds who have a normal development pattern. Your comments are coming from a place of concern. I think your sister-in-law probably got all butthurt because she's sensitive about the fact that her kid has behavioral issues, and so she chose to interpret it as sweater weather trash-talked my child. You apologized. Leave her be and let her process for a bit. Maybe she'll forgive you, maybe she won't, but that's not really your problem. Frankly, with a kid like Jane around, I would be avoiding family gatherings anyway. Too much headache. My sister from a young age has only one person to rely on, and that person was me. We came from a broken family with one parent that was only around till I was 5, and the other who was struck in a cycle of addiction. Because of our situation, I grew up very quickly and shielded her from as much as I could. She obviously was aware of what was going on, but she was not in the crosshair. I started with stealing from our mother to make sure we had food and bills were paid. I got a part-time job at 13 because we couldn't rely on our mother, and when I graduated, I immediately got 2 jobs and we moved out. I had to push my sister through high school. She wasn't an easy teen for obvious reasons, on top of going month to month trying to get as much money together to pay our bills. At 19, she finally graduated after being held back a year. She changed her tune a lot and she started working as well and had her own place when she was 21. I finally got a shot to do something for myself and got a degree. As a result, I got a much better job, but unfortunately that was right before the pandemic hit, so I pretty much went from hired to fired as I was a new hire. Now, the reason I'm saying all that is not to pat myself on the back, but to stress why my reaction is the way it is. I was out of work on the brink of losing my apartment and only had one person who I expected I could turn to, my sister. She was recently married, still lives obviously, with her husband. So I asked if I could stay a few weeks at most, a few months, until I got a new job. It was a no. I was taken aback, but it remained to be a no. A week or two later, I was kicked out of my apartment. I asked again, and it was a no. At this point, I am homeless, and the only reason I didn't end up sleeping on the damn street was because I could crash at a few friends until I got a temporary job. I rented a room with a bunch of roommates for a while. Eventually got a job in my field again, and I am now doing fine. That said, I have not spoken to my sister since. She has called, messaged, banged on my door, sent crying voice messages, apologized dozens of times, tried to explain herself, tried going to my job, tried going to friends, everything. I haven't said a word to her. It's been over a year now. She recently had a child and she is still desperately trying to reach out. She claims her husband refused to let me stay. He even reached out several times to beg me to reach out. But to me, the one time I needed her, she basically tells me to F myself. I feel like it was the last push I needed to just end that chapter of my life. I feel bad, but just not bad enough, I guess. Even my friends and girlfriend are on my case that I should forgive her and that they understood at first, but now think I'm being an a-hole. What would you guys do? Tell your friends and girlfriend that only you get to decide when you're ready to talk to your sister. That it's not their place nor their business to try to force you into an interaction that you aren't emotionally ready for. And if they care about you at all, they will shut the duck up and let you do things when you're ready to do them. I'd send your sister one message telling her that you aren't closing the door on ever having a relationship with her, but you need her to back off and give you the time and space to work through your feelings of betrayal. That you will reach out to her when and if you are ready to, and not a minute before. The more she pushes, the less you want to be around her. Then get into counseling to work through your feelings. Decide how much of a relationship with her you can handle emotionally, and then proceed from there. If your girlfriend and friends keep pushing, then they are only doing so for their own selfish purposes, rather than out of concern for you, and you need to shut them down hard. Update. First, to answer a couple of questions. 1. The first few no's were without reasonable explanation. I was not aware of her given reason that her husband was not okay with it until later. 2. She did not know she was pregnant when she declined, and most of it happened before she would have even been pregnant in the first place. I mean, most of this took place over a year ago. I even put that in the post, so I am not sure how that math would even work. 3. I am not an anti-V or dirty or something. I got my 2 vaccination shots the moment I could get them. And well, while my personal hygiene is not exactly anyone's business, I shower once a day and my apartment is spotless. I told my girlfriend and friends who involved themselves or were involved by my sister to back off or lose my number. They do not understand my perspective and they likely never will. And I need to get that through my head, as I have a tendency to talk about my life as if it is a standard. But it is a standard only to me. Luckily, most people don't go through any of that. I obviously had a longer and face-to-face conversation with my girlfriend and with individual close friends, but it boils down to that. One friend kept pestering me about it, and I ended up dropping him as a friend. But my girlfriend was apologetic, and most friends were either apologetic or said they'd drop it. I ended up writing a long email to my sister, and while I will not copy and paste the entire thing here, as it contains a lot of personal information and far more horrible stuff, it more or less is boiled down to me explaining to her how her refusal to take me in for what ended up being a few weeks made me feel, and I detailed a long list of things I had done to take care of her. I ended up finishing my email, telling her that even if I take her version of the story as truth, and her husband is the cause of me not being allowed to stay, that it is entirely irrelevant to me, because that just means she didn't fight for me at all. I also informed her I have no interest in meeting her child as of this moment, and I have no interest in reconnecting with her, and if that changes in the future, I will be the one to contact her. I told her to let this be a lesson to her, as it has been a painful lesson to me. Boiled down, I have decided to move on and keep the door on the tiniest of cracks. She has responded a lot since that moment. She seems unable to accept it, but I have not responded since. You did what I'd have done in that situation. She turned her back on you the one time she could have shined and showed you how much she appreciated what you did for her, that she had your back, as you've had hers. Her actions, or lack thereof, said everything there was to say.